Hi, my name is Mark Yuskowitz. I'm editor-at-large for MM+M, and welcome to the C-Suite Insights series, sponsored by Magnolia Innovation, and to today's webinar, in which academic executives will share how pharma should engage with customers. Before I hand things over to our moderator, Jennifer, I'll just say a few things to let you know what to expect. Our speakers, who are leaders of academic institutions, will weigh in on the importance of knowing the business side of oncology and the impact of the cross-functional teams that exist within pharma. Some of the themes I'll touch on today are opportunities for oncology-focused pharma companies to better engage with C-suite customers across all types of cancer centers, the need for deeper and broader acumen when it comes to the business of oncology, as well as for more efficient coordination as an account team in order to best address the needs of the C-suite customer and overall customer institution. Our speakers have years of experience in these fields, so I know that you'll gain a lot from this presentation. And just a few housekeeping items. This is a 60-minute webcast with approximately 45 minutes for the presentation. There'll be roughly 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. So be sure to submit your questions using the Q&A function of your webcast dashboard, and we'll queue them up for our speakers. Okay, I'll now hand things over to Jennifer to introduce herself and our speakers and lead you through the presentation. Take it away, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to those who are joining us from the West Coast. I'm Jennifer Tursick, the moderator for today's presentation, and we have two amazing C-suite leaders joining us, Sam Abdolghani from Yale and Jamie Bachman from Johns Hopkins, to really lead us through a discussion about how they see pharmaceutical companies engaging with C-suite leaders like themselves, specifically in academic institutions, and moreover, what opportunities exist for pharmaceutical engagement to be elevated with C-suite leaders like themselves. So before I pass it over to Sam and Jamie for introductions, let me share a little background about myself. I am, again, Jennifer Tursick. I spent 25 years within the pharmaceutical industry, starting with being a sales representative, serving as a first-line sales manager, a second-line sales leader, and being the head of two different training and development organizations, with my last corporate role serving as the global head of training and development. And now I'm an independent consultant and president of ISO Leadership Solutions. Sam, can I turn it over to you for your introduction?
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for having me, and good afternoon, everyone. Sam Abdolghani, I'm the Executive Director for Oncology Pharmacy at Yale New Haven Health. I spent my entire career here at Yale in a variety of roles. In my current role, I have responsibility over all aspects of oncology pharmacy practice, operational, financial, and HR. In addition to my work on oncology pharmacy, I'm engaged in multiple quality improvement initiatives and projects across the health system. For example, opioid stewardship, strategic planning, and I'm also the IRB chair for oncology studies at Yale University. Personally, one of my areas of interest is value-based care and outcome research. So this is something I talk to pharma representative about all the time, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Sam. Jamie?
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon. My name is Jamie Bachman. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer at the Kimmel Cancer Center at Johns Hopkins. I've worked in the cancer space in a variety of community and academic settings for over 20 years. And I've spent most of my time focusing on operations, strategy, and finance related to cancer care delivery. I'm excited to talk with you all this afternoon, and thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you both. And I think it's probably best to get started with a general observation from each of you. I think, I'd love to start with getting your perspective of how you feel pharmaceutical organizations are keeping up with evolving changes, not just changes outside of your institutions, but also changes that are happening within your institutions. How would you say pharma's doing? Jamie, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think it depends on the company, it depends on the people, but generally speaking, I think there's an opportunity there. The industry is quite complex. Our organizations are quite complex, and in fairness, keeping up with it would be quite a challenge. But I think there are some opportunities for engagement in different kinds of ways, and I think we could take that grade from a passing grade to an excelling grade with a little bit of work.
All right, so passing. Sam, how about for you?
I agree with Jamie. Some people do a great job keeping up, not only with what's happening in healthcare, but locally what's happening in my institution and our priorities. And some people do not do as good of a job. So I'm not going to give somebody a grade here. There's definitely work to do, and it's bi-directional. It's work to do on our pharma side and on our side to share our priorities and our structure and what we expect from others.
Good. Now I'm curious, both of you are leaders within academic institutions. Is there anything unique that you would say that is things that people should be paying attention to that are related to an academic institution versus a community-based setting?
I can start here. I think Jamie touched on it when he said that we are a complex organization. I think that's probably the most important aspect that separates us from community practices. Not better or worse, it's just different. So in a community practice where you probably can talk to one individual that can cover a lot of grounds, operational, financial, and clinical. In an academic health setting, these functions are divided among many departments and many people within the same department. So just appreciation of this complexity is probably the most important part.
Thanks, Sam. Jamie, anything to add?
Yeah, I'd say it's complex in all the ways that Sam described, and as the delivery is increasingly through healthcare systems and not through individual academic hospitals, that complexity is even more apparent. And so entry points can be clinical, operational, they could be location-based, they could be specialty-based, and in some cases, in many cases in the academic setting, disease-specific based as well. And so it's a different type of approach to managing the business that we're working in, and it's not always easy to know your way in or around without some guidance because of that complexity.
Very fair. Thank you. Let's move on. Over the summer, I had the chance to speak to, I would say, two colleagues of yours at different institutions, but still C-suite leaders, one at a community and one at an academic institution. As part of that conversation, they had shared there were two significant gaps that they had identified that pharmaceutical companies are missing. The first one was really a true business of oncology acumen across the customer-facing teams within pharmaceutical account teams. And the second gap that they identified was the ability to improve the way teams, the account teams within pharma, coordinated and communicated and showed up to you as a C-suite and as an academic institution. Let me pause there and ask your reaction to those two gaps they identified over the summer. Sam, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I agree with both. And it's easier to start with that second one, actually. Just like pharma is also highly specialized and roles are really specific to a specific function, we are broken down in almost the same way. So having the understanding that my role is different from my clinical manager, from someone else, it's important. And sometimes we get this generic language. I get generic emails from someone that says, I'm so-and-so, I'm an MSL, and as you may be aware, our company is involved in developing innovative therapies, clearly cut and paste. So that just tells me that one, there's not much effort in understanding what I do or how my organization is structured. So the answer to that email is probably nothing. I will reply or delete it. So just taking the time to understand our structure, our priorities, our challenges. That's number one on the organization side, and equally important, what I do and how we are divided within pharmacy or in Jamie's environment within his organization, that we don't all do the same thing or all can answer the same questions or concerns or engage in partnership. On the first point was understanding the business acumen. I think people are just almost super specialized, that they only know this one task or one role, not realizing what else happening. So when we talk about one drug and coming to talk about specifically one piece of information and just ignoring that there is a lot of value-based initiatives. There are budget pressures, reimbursement cuts. You don't have to be an expert on all of those, but you need a basic understanding, and then be expert in your own domain. And I often see it's just a one-sided knowledge and not much beyond that, which is obviously disappointing.
Okay. And Jamie, before I pass it to you, Sam, I'd love to maybe piggyback on something you had shared about, they really don't know me, they don't know what I do. Is there advice that you would give, especially if you're a new member of an account team at a pharmaceutical company? How can somebody get to know a little bit about you before they actually have a chance to meet you? Would you give any advice or any tips on how somebody could uncover maybe some things that are important to you or the institution?
I honestly think the easiest thing to do is ask. So the first email, other than just give me a generic language that you can paste from the company's website, just introduce yourself, be genuine, and say, this is my role and this is what I'm trying to accomplish. Who within your organization that can help with that? And if it's me, I'll do that. If not, I'll direct that person to the right person within our organization to help. So it's great just saying hello and this is what I do. Can you help me out? I'll be more likely to answer that than just a generic email.
Thank you for sharing that. Sure. Jamie, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add that we recognize that the pharmaceutical companies are complex, just as the healthcare delivery settings are. And so as we think about the coordination of the teams as they are interacting with us, we know and appreciate that there are a lot of subspecialty roles within those teams. But when we have 1, 2, 5 different people from one company representing one product coming to us with different questions and small snippets, it can be frustrating and difficult for our teams or our individuals on the delivery side to manage. And so as we think about what that would look like in the future, I think coordination of those teams with entry points that are consistent, that have language like what Sam described, could be quite helpful. Then thinking about the business of oncology, as I zoom out to all of the things that many of us in these roles are responsible for, certainly the cancer medicine delivery is a driver of financial performance across many health systems and organizations. There are a lot of people dependent on us. It's helpful if the people who we interact with understand and appreciate that. And also that there are other services that go beyond specific disease sites, specific drugs, and specific delivery mechanisms. So surgical and radiotherapy interventions, supportive care, and multi-site locations. There's so many complicated aspects. And I think the more of an appreciation the folks who are interacting with us and our teams have for the complex nature of that delivery system, the easier it will be for us to find a common language.
No, I think that's a really fair point. And Sam, I'll open it up if you have anything to add around maybe that team coordination piece. But Jamie, let me ask you, I agree. I mean, the complexities and the matrix types of organizations don't just exist within the academic institution. It absolutely exists within pharma as well. But I'm curious, why do, in your opinion, teams fall short with good communication, good collaboration? Like, what is it? What barriers exist, in your opinion?
I think my perception is that they don't communicate well with one another inside the teams, which makes it more difficult for them as a team or individuals to communicate with us. And so when that's not in place, we'll get different messages, conflicting messages, or repetitive messages, any of which could be frustrating or confusing. And so I think that the coordination starts internally, because just as we, I think, appreciate and accept that there's some complexities that we need to own and help folks manage through, the same is true on the flip side as the teams try to engage with us.
Any guesstimate on why? I'm curious if you've ever thought about that and wondered why there isn't coordination within the account teams from a pharmaceutical perspective.
I don't know, and Sam may interact with them more directly and more often than I do. My observation is that I've seen some folks do this actually quite well, where it seems to be very intentional, and where it doesn't seem to be incredibly intentional, it doesn't happen. And that seems simple and obvious, but it's really the direct observation of, if it's not really going out of the way to make it feel that way, then it just doesn't feel that way. And if it is partial, it feels almost as if it's not happening at all.
Got it. Thank you for that. Sam, anything to add there?
Yeah, so I'll go back to the coordination. There's some group that do this very well. We have, and through trial and error, we come up with understanding that I need one meeting for this one company and not for every product. Otherwise, my calendar would be filled just for one company. And we were able to do that very well, where we have structured meetings where everybody's invited. That you address the communication aspect that Jamie was talking about. We're all on the same page, and we're able to do that in a structured and scheduled times, once, twice, or three, four times. It depends really on the topic. In terms of why people don't do it well, maybe I'm not gonna. In addition to what Jamie mentioned, I think there is some concern over compliance. People think that they cannot have the same conversation, or who is supposed to talk about what. And I really appreciate what Pharma has to deal with in terms of regulatory compliance, but that doesn't mean people work in silo. I think there is it should be some form of cross communication, at least for when you approach an academic medical center, that this is our goal and this is my role, and we'll move forward based on that. And I think the other issue is the making assumptions. You assume that this is what Jamie wants to hear, or this is what Sam. Basic communication skills, right? Don't assume what I want and what I need and what my challenge is just because it's national problems or issues. Again, ask and let's have a dialogue. So those are really probably the two main issues why communication don't work as well.
No, thank you guys for sharing a little bit more around that. And kind of taking us back to where we started on this question, the two gaps that were identified from colleagues over the summer. Are we missing anything? They pointed out, business of oncology acumen. They pointed out really good cohesive coordination among the account team from a pharmaceutical perspective. In your opinion, is there anything else that you're seeing as significant gaps in terms of holding Pharma back from ultimate good engagement with you at the C-suite level?
I would only add the approach. In addition to knowledge, sometimes it's just a one-size-fits-all approach. When depending on the drug or the disease state, we both come from academic medical centers, but I can guarantee you there are differences that should be acknowledged. So the message and the communication, interaction, partnership have to be tailored. It's not a one way to do things with academic medical center. I'm sure it's not the same for every community practice. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this ties to the knowing the business point that was being made, but just a breadth of knowledge and a variety of ways to engage, conversations that we often have, deal with ways that we can work together as partners in appropriate and compliant ways, and trying to find ways to add value to the interactions that our collective teams have. And we know that that's complicated, but I think exploring those kinds of things could close some of those gaps, and it would give us more to work towards through in a common way. And I really do like the way that Sam described having these structured interactions that might have multiple layers to them with the right people involved. Can help to close some of those gaps about who to approach, to have which discussions with which focus.
Good. No, very much agreed. And I'm curious, one of the pieces that your colleagues mentioned was that business of oncology. And you also each mentioned it, of the importance it has in kind of the pharmaceutical representatives knowing more than just a drug or a clinical trial. It's really the breadth of knowledge and acumen that they have. So for you, could I ask, how would you define the business of oncology? Is there a specific definition or topics for you that fall under that business of oncology umbrella?
I can tell you there is not a specific area that fits nicely under the business of oncology. For me, and I work on the pharmacy side, it's really all aspect from drug availability, procurement, storage, dispensing, reimbursement, and value-based, the value of that drug. Historically, we're cost-focused. Really, it's all about the cost of product or cost of the drug. that is no longer the case, and we have not been in that space for years. So it's all aspect of care delivery from the time the drug or the product is approved, to even outcomes beyond that, everything in between. So I would be shortchanging the business of oncology if I point to one or two. It's all of it.
And I'll zoom out and take a slightly different approach. I think that you think about things like access and quality of care and patient experience and multidisciplinary care coordination, supportive services, distribution of services to multiple locations throughout health systems. Those are the types of business of oncology topics that I think are really important to be familiar with and conversant in. And to Sam's point earlier, when you have people who are very, very skilled and knowledgeable about a very, very specific thing with a quite precise application to one disease or a very small group of diseases, it feels like it's very narrow when we're talking about that zoom out approach in the business that we're working in, and finding a way for the two of them to converge a little more intentionally, I think is quite helpful.
It really limits the value of this interaction. So if I have 30 minutes, I want to be able to cover a lot of grounds. And if all I can talk about is one piece and everything else I don't know, that this interaction with time is limited for everyone. It just does not maximize everybody's time.
No, I appreciate that. And two follow-ups. One is, being in an academic institution, are there absolutely must-knows that are unique to the academic environment versus maybe others who are calling on community institutions? Or would you say the trends are the trends, the topics are the topics?
I could start that there tends to be a slightly heavier emphasis on the delivery of care in the context of clinical trials and basic research in the academic setting. And I think you'll hear that as you interact with not only the administrators, but certainly the clinicians. But as importantly, from an interaction with the team's standpoint, it's important to understand that in healthcare systems, not just academic, but in comparison to community physician-run practices, there's a division of labor that's quite stark in contrast, where purchasing and supply chain and finance and operations and nursing and physicians and pharmacy are all quite distinct teams that work well together. But depending on the question, the way it's placed, and what the answers or what the interactions need to be, you'll really come to appreciate that they are multi-layered, which is oftentimes much different than what my experience has been in a community setting, where it could be, I think Sam described it as a one-stop shop or a single entry point for knowing many of these things.
Fair. Thank you, Jamie. Sam, anything to add?
No, I think Jamie covered all those aspects. We are just a complex organizations. The things that you can do in a community practice for one meeting is probably take a lot longer. So we're not always efficient. I don't want to give the impression that we got everything done right, but we just there are more layers to navigate. On the other side, I think we all community practice or academic medical center have the same goal. We are all in the business of caring for cancer patients. We all want to provide the best care possible for our patients. The road to accomplish that is different. And the complexities, it's just part of that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm curious, are there any trends, maybe through what you're seeing with regulations, the government, that you have your eye on, that you're watching for what comes next in a particular area under that business of oncology umbrella?
I would say that alternative payment models are on the horizon with the introduction of the Enhancing Oncology model that was announced over the summer, and the applications were just due. I believe this to be version 2.0 of the OCM and really a test case for something we might expect to see in both the community and the academic setting. It's not a test case, but an expectation of participation sooner than later. It's not tomorrow. It's probably still 5 years out, maybe even longer with the models running out that long. But it's on the horizon, and I think that has everyone a little uncomfortable, but also excited about using it as an instigator of change and a catalyst for some innovation.
Thank you. Sam, anything you have your eye on?
value-based care. So we were a member participant in OCM, and we put in an application for the enhancing oncology model. Right now we're doing some modeling to see how we're gonna fare. We are looking specifically at changing the conversation from cost to value. Value is really should be the focus of everyone. Love to hear about the cost of and a reimbursement, but that just narrows, very narrow view to conversation that we should be having. We should be talking about value.
Very good. And I think, being well read and keeping up with all of these trends is critical. And I'm curious if you would have advice to share. Like, what are you reading? What advice would you give to the teams out there in the pharmaceutical industry who are curious, who want to keep up with things, but maybe just don't know where to look for their own time to dig into journals or white papers or different resources so they can become more knowledgeable? Any advice that you'd give them?
That's a tough question because it really depends on what is your primary focus and what you want to do. I definitely try to keep up with some clinical information because my hat as a pharmacist, but also keep up with a lot of reimbursement. I actually get a lot of my information now from national meetings. And connected with my colleagues. So I do read journals, and we can list a few of them. Connected with colleagues and national meetings probably been the best source for me to keep up with many things. While we are different, we have many of the same problems. So access to care, site of care restrictions, and many others really come up often, and we learn from each other.
Yeah, I think the peer networking is certainly helpful, but if you're not a part of the peer group, thinking of the national meetings that also put out the publications, I think are helpful, and some of the regular news deliveries. And so examples of those might be professional societies like ASCO, membership networks like the NCCN, other groups like the ACCC, the Community Cancer Centers Network, and a number of healthcare administration affinity groups that are specific to cancer. You could certainly get any number of helpful pieces of information through some of the subscription services that are oftentimes free that put out both general healthcare, which is actually importantly something that I think should be called out. We're talking cancer specific, but having to zoom out of healthcare general could be quite helpful as well. And so even simple things like the Beckers and the advisory boards of the world can give some people context of where we're living and working in every day.
And I'll certainly give a bit of a plug here just for, anybody within the pharmaceutical industry who's listening into this conversation to take the conversation back within their organization to figure out how they can build up their training and development program that really tackles not just what you need to know today, but can anticipate some of the future trends to bring that knowledge to members across the team. But let me use that to transition a little bit, because bring the training, bring the knowledge to members of the team. Who, in your opinion, from a pharmaceutical industry perspective, is on the team who should have good business of oncology acumen? You've spoken about MSLs in our discussion already. You've talked about sales representatives, account managers. Who for you is in scope for really having good business of oncology acumen?
Well, before I answer, I have to tell you, it's almost impossible to keep track of all the titles. And every time I get the structure down in my head, there's just a new title that pops. All great roles, I'm sure they are important. So just the titles to keep track of them is hard. For me, over the last couple of years, it's been important for me to connect with the key account executives. And I think most companies have that role. Somebody that not only understands the business side well, but also can connect me with all the other members of that team as needed. So occasionally I'll have a clinical question, reimbursement question. So in my mind, I try to keep one name for every company actually, and the key account executive can be that go-to person or the lead person to manage his communication.
Okay. Jamie?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think of it. Someone who's responsible on the team for being up to date and keeping the rest of the team involved. But if you were to go the next level of sophistication, I think it'd be reasonable to think anyone who's customer facing, that's interacting with folks like Sam and I, would be pretty good candidates for having a working and walking knowledge of this stuff. Probably a slightly different depths depending on the role, but the basic working knowledge I think is really important for everyone.
No, I think that's fair. And Sam, let me maybe go back to you a little bit because, you know, if you do have that account executive position in your mind, that's kind of the person you go to, what level of expertise, what are the topics that you feel they are able to kind of discuss with you that are different than the other roles that, you know, you're not seeing as top of mind?
So I think that obviously it depends on the role within academic medical centers. For me, I'm an executive director for oncology pharmacy, so I want that person to know all about drug, all the business related to drug. So access, reimbursement, distribution, outcomes. I assume that the key contact person for Jamie could be different and have different skill set depending on the partnership. If I was somebody who's in charge of research, I want somebody to look at opening clinical trials and supporting IITs. So for me, it's really that business related to treatment and their impact on patients.
Okay. No, thank you for sharing that and letting me kind of stay on that with you for just one additional second. I'd love to hear from the both of you if you do think about the exceptional teams who you work with. I think, Sam, it was you earlier in our discussion, you used the word, or no, Jamie, I'm sorry, it was you. You talked about the partnership, right? What does exceptional look like to you? What are the characteristics? How do they act? What is their skill level? Can you describe, without stating necessarily a team, but just the general characteristics of what exceptional does look like to you?
I can start. I think one of the most important things for me is just the individuals and the teams collectively being genuine. Sam said this before, knowing him and understanding the roles I think is really important. There's some part of that that's going to be a personal connection in some way, but realistically it's also just a professional understanding and appreciation for the work that we all do. And I think that when we've seen individuals and teams be able to converse in a way that doesn't feel scripted, that doesn't feel boilerplate like the email that Sam was using as an example before, it allows us to be more open and think about what the partnership looks like in that conversation as administrators.
Okay. Sam, anything
and I
to add?
can follow up. I could not overemphasize genuine. I think it's very important. At the end of the day, we all have jobs to do, and I appreciate that. We all we have different objectives, right? But as long as we are genuine and transparent in our interaction, that goes a long way. Fake also come across clearly. So being genuine, the people that do interact with me very well are very transparent. Again, I always tell everybody, we have our goals, you have your goal. If they align, perfect, life is good. We can work on those common goals. And if they don't, that's also perfect. But at least we have understanding what everybody's trying to accomplish. And I will also add responsive. I pride myself by answering right away when people reach out with a question. Very frustrating if we ask for, we have a request and we had to wait days or weeks. So being responsive is also important. The people that respond in a timely manner, they have a special place in my heart, because now I know every time I need something, they're going to help me. And every time they ask me for something, I jump on their request right away.
So
It's
what I
a
heard
people sport at the end of the day. It's really, there's nothing unique about pharma versus academic medical center. It's really people sport. We all people, we all serve people, we interact with people. So common and basic skills about being cordial and cooperative, collaborative, all apply.
No, and I heard earlier in our discussion, it was about communication skills. Just now, it is about being genuine, transparent, not scripted. But I'm curious, those are, I think, phenomenal characteristics. But there's different skills that sit underneath there that sometimes might get overlooked. Let me throw a couple out, get your reaction, and not just a reaction to that, but maybe add to it if you would. What I heard was maybe good curiosity, seeking to understand who are you, what do you do, how does the process work, but also good listening, good active listening skills to be able to not just hear what's being said, but be able to connect the dots to really what it means to them so they can give you that unscripted, very genuine interaction. Your reaction to that, and then what would you add to it?
I can start with active listening. I'll go back to the email I usually get with generic language. It is somebody coming with a message. They just want to deliver the message. I can be talking about other things, but the goal is to deliver that message and walk out. So being a good listener and hear my comments, my concerns, and deviate as needed. It's extremely important.
I think the curiosity piece is an important one, Jennifer, and it really opens the door. And at the same time, important to balance that with the genuine comment that we were making before. So as long as it's not forced and it feels genuine, I think that curiosity is quite helpful. We all appreciate that everyone has their skill sets. Some of them are learned, some of them are just natural to folks. And so the ones that can be taught and coached, developing the active listening skills, for example, and then coaching perhaps curiosity, I think are things that can really help folks come along.
Thank you. All right, you ready for my last question?
Ready.
Bring it on.
All right, good. All right. So this is a bit about the water cooler in academic institutions. And what I mean by that is this. I'm envisioning when you all are standing around with your peers, you're grabbing an elevator, you're grabbing lunch, you're standing around the proverbial water cooler, and the topic of pharma comes up. I'm curious, what does the conversation sound like with your peers?
I can start alphabetical again, AVD. Two things really that come often. Again, wearing my pharmacy hat, cost. We just saw a drug which cost more than $2 million not too long ago approved. If somebody on a call from this company, nothing personal, but we have CAR-Ts that all have $1 million or close. So cost comes often and related to that access to the therapies, and who does a good job supporting the access, because some people do a great job. And then in the meetings, I'm not going to mention names here, I share who does an exceptional job supporting patients and who does the minimum or none. The other thing that we talk about often is compliance. Just like Pharma has their own compliance rules and about engagement, and we do have some vendor policies, and we share that as much as possible, not because we are mean and we don't want to talk to anybody, but it's just internal policy that we need to follow. So if somebody is unable to talk or chat, there may be a good reason, or they can only talk about something specific. And the last one is partnership. We really want to partner when it makes sense, when the goals are aligned. So I'd love to hear from Pharma representative and what's the interaction with academic medical centers like, and what they'd like to change. So those are kind of my three issues that come up.
Definitely open to the feedback as well. I'd say the couple of different water cooler experiences that I've had have ranged on the positive side, some real genuine complementary complementary reactions and support because of the types of interactions folks have had. I've had some personal interactions. I know my teams have had good experiences with particular teams, activating new things, working through problems, helping to bring products into organizations that have been different or new or complicated, more so than usual. A lot of great feedback around that. And on the flip side, when you think back to what we talked about earlier, when the interactions were not genuine, scripted, unhelpful, generic, whatever, didn't have a specific need to happen, you'll get a lot of eye rolling and here we go again. And is this going to be a good use of my time? And I think understanding and being able to manage that conversation on our side as providers is actually really important, to be able to provide the feedback and help them be better. And hopefully things like this today are some insight into what that looks like.
No, thank you both. Before I invite Mark to come back on to the screen with any questions that have been entered by the participants, let me just open it up. Jamie, Sam, any last words that you'd like to share before we open it up to Q&A?
I'd just say we're all in this together. I think at the heart of it, whether it's the healthcare delivery system or the pharmaceutical industry that manufactures and delivers the drugs to us to provide to patients, we're all really here to help people. And so finding a common ground to make that easier, finding a common ground to make that more enjoyable for everyone as human beings, I think is really important. And if we're focused on that, I think that it can help the relationships be strong and be productive.
For me, we want a solid, effective interaction. It's a win-win for everyone. And that's one of the reasons we are here today. We want to make sure this is productive for everyone.
Agreed. And I'll just share one last time. I do think these types of conversations are very compelling because I think those who are within the pharmaceutical industry often have a significant amount of experience, especially in oncology. And I think it's just a great reminder that no matter what our years of experience may be, the trends are so fast, the acumen is so current, that it really does take active effort each and every day to stay ahead of that, to be in service the best that we can for you. So again, thank you for your candid conversation. And Mark, I'll invite if you have any questions for the panel from the participants.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer, and thanks, Sam and Jamie, for a really good presentation. It was a really nice note to end on and segue over to our Q&A. I just want to remind folks out there listening that you can submit a question for any of our speakers using the Q&A button on your dashboard. We've got one question here that I'll just kick things off with for you, Jamie and Sam. When talking with pharma, do you find it most helpful to have experts across different functions, or would you prefer to speak with one main contact who can triage other pharma resources?
My personal preference is to have one point of contact who can then triage. I suspect that I have a lot of my colleagues who work on very specific teams might have the inverse of that, but my particular preference is for general and triage in my particular role.
Same here. I prefer to have that one contact, one main source of information that can triage the need. I actually say I'm getting old now. I can't keep track of a lot of people in my age. So one name per company, and sometimes I say beware. Now I got you in my head for this specific company, so I'm gonna get back to you. And most of them actually embrace that role and like to be that. So one person.
And in fairness, on the flip side, I think having a single point of contact in these complex organizations can be quite helpful, and whether that's an administrative leader or a physician or nursing or pharmacy leader, where we can help to triage to those content experts on the industry side, I think is a fair expectation, and something we know doesn't always happen.
Mm-hmm. Right, and as I think Sam mentioned, that if some of the companies would prefer to have one meeting per brand, then your calendars would fill up very rapidly indeed. So I can understand the need, to have one meeting per company, a number of brands, a single point of contact, make it the most efficient use of your time. Okay. So another question here, and some more questions are coming in on the queue. I thank the audience here. Keep them coming. Are there certain times in the year when it's difficult to engage with pharma? For example, around December or January, which would be the holiday times for all of us.
I'd say in academic healthcare systems, it's not unusual to see a slowdown over the summer when the medical schools slowdown. It's not unusual to see a break in the action between Thanksgiving and New Year's. Not to say that there's not a lot going on, but that's when things slow down a tad. And knowing your organization is quite important as well. The budget years tend to be different from place to place. They may coincide with the calendar year, or they may be fiscal years that reset on July 1st, for example. And understanding the pressures that the organizations might be under and focus that they might need to have, where taking meetings from pharma partners to be really, really challenging. And Sam's might be different from mine, so there's not an assumption that it would be consistent from place to place.
Yeah, I think that highlight the main point that we've been talking about, that we are close but not exactly the same. We may have the same kind of lockout between Christmas and New Year's Day because we connected to medical school and everybody's gone. Certainly around major meetings, it's hard to get a hold of anyone around ASCO or ASH. But also on a personal level. So mine, we have review, we have a performance evaluation for all our teams in October, November. So November could be very tough for me. And it's perfectly fine for Jamie because he has a different cycle. So I think it's, again, getting to know the organization will go a long way. With those main events, I think will be in common.
Sure. Thanks for that. Another question here: which COVID-driven pharma engagement practices do you anticipate continuing into the future? Which ones will you leave in the COVID era? I think the pandemic really gave all of us an opportunity to kind of re-examine, our pre-existing notions of just this is the way we've done things because this is the way we've done it. But how are you using that as an opportunity to kind of change up your approach?
I honestly think in-person meetings will disappear forever. There will be rare events, and that because there are, virtual meetings are much more efficient. COVID or no COVID, I think most of us are back to normal in some kind of form, and we still have virtual meetings. And I love them. I think I can have back to back to back. If they were in person, I couldn't do that. So at least that's one aspect. I try to tell people this is not because we don't want to see you. I think this is what the hospital is going towards, and it's more efficient for everyone. You don't have to travel all over the place. Just talk to as many people as possible, and we can also get many people that otherwise cannot be in the same place on a virtual call quickly. So that's probably one main change that I anticipate will continue in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't agree more. We see that not just in these types of engagements, but really all of the other interactions that we have as well. It allows more people to be more involved in different ways, much more efficient, better use of everyone's time.
Sure. Makes sense. Certainly that's something that we're hearing a lot of people saying they found value in that. They're going to be continuing that going forward. Staying on that, pandemic theme for a second, how has COVID-19 and that experience influenced your interaction with pharma? Gary would like to know. Thank you for the question, Gary. And has the industry been able to flex to meet your expectations?
I think it's really the same answer. We've had to flex, as has the industry. I think actually many have done that quite well. I think we all had to adapt quite quickly in early 2020. And I think it's gone increasingly well over time as we've learned which approaches work better than others, what kind of engagements work well virtually versus email versus in person. And I think that we'll continue to lean on the virtual platforms, like Sam described before, because of the efficiency. And for those who haven't done it or haven't done it well by their own judgment or by what others tell them, I think that's a focus point for the next few months to get it up to speed, because I really don't see this changing much or going away anytime soon.
Sure. Sam, anything to add on that point?
No, not much really. Most pharmaceutical companies were able to pivot quickly to the virtual needs. I think we are I'm not seeing anyone that was not able to do that. I do see some requests coming to asking, can we go back to one-on-one? And that's when we're trying to kind of readjust the expectation that it's just not, we're not going to go back to the one-on-ones in person.
Sure. Thank you for that. Sam, staying with you for a second, you mentioned value-based care and how that's something that you've been trying to shift your organization to. And you also mentioned how partnering, is a big priority for you when you're interacting with pharma. We'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on what you think the future of value-based partnering is with the pharma industry, if you'd care to share a little bit more on that topic.
Well, I see at least two clear areas. One is real-world outcomes. I think we all know that drugs are being approved based on clinical trial with very specific exclusion criteria. The patient that we treat every day, most of them don't like the patient we're enrolling in clinical trial for a variety of reasons. So real-world outcome is an area of need. And then pharmacoeconomic analyses. And I think a lot of companies start to look at that beyond here is the J code and here's a reimbursement that you're going to get from the drug. Looking at pharmacoeconomics as an important endpoint. I think Europeans do a much better job than us in looking at that when they evaluate new products. So more work around the response that you get from drug, but the side effect profile, the total cost of care. And we've done that with some classes. We were going to be looking to continue to expand on that, and partnering with pharma would be good because if they have the interest and we can just collaborate. So I don't have 20 different partners. Maybe we can do something on a class level or a disease level.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And that's thank you for those thoughts. I've heard that the contracting is picking up steam, but a lot of those agreements are difficult to operationalize, so to speak, because you have to measure total cost of care or reductions in hospitalizations, and those types of things sometimes can be moving targets.
We gotta find a way, right? I think it's right. It's not easy. If it was easy, it would have been done a long time ago. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And there's a lot of smart people in healthcare. I think we should give it a try. Sure.
Okay. When you both interact, with members of the industry, I think it was MSLs were one stakeholder that you mentioned interacting with, but when it comes to the level of oncology business acumen, do you find the interactions with MSLs, medical science liaisons, for those who are not familiar with that acronym, to be helpful, or do you find more helpful, other members of the pharmaceutical value chain?
I can start. Generally, MSLs are clinically focused. They know the drug, they know the data, they may know the competitor drug and data with that drug, but that's where it ends. I actually, in my experience, not many MSLs go beyond that. Now, it's really up to pharma to decide what everybody's role should be. They should have basic understanding whether they want them to have more global expertise. That's kind of up to them. But historically, that has not been the case.
Sure. Jamie, anything to add around there?
I'd agree. It's been pretty narrow for those folks, and deep content expertise, but tend not to be as broad in their understanding of some of the things we've been talking about today.
Sure. Okay. The industry, some academic medical centers we've seen have put some restrictions around interactions with the pharma industry. And I'd like to perhaps hear where your institutions stand in terms of that. Are there sort of limitations around interactions with, say, sales reps coming into the institution, sharing samples, giving detailed sessions with members of the clinical team, that kind of thing. Can you kind of give me a little bit of an insight there on where your institutions stand on that?
I'd say generally the organizations that I've interacted with and have worked for in the past and present have lined up the in-person interactions of the types that you described with the patient visiting policies, and if anything, slightly more stringent for those kinds of visits. I suspect that every organization treats this a little bit differently, but would be quite open to those that seem appropriate for delivering types of education to particular clinicians that need to know information about a particular drug, less interested or less open about in-person interactions of the general variety and relationship building variety that we've been talking about so far today. And I think a lot of push in most organizations that I am familiar with to keep those virtual.
Sure. Sam, anything to add? Like, is it different for oncology? Is there more of a less of a reliance on those interactions?
Not much. And I actually spent a lot of time trying to address this misconception that we are hard to get in touch with, or we have new rules and restrictions. Our rules and restrictions have not changed in the last decade. Nothing changed. And I don't know where this idea is coming from. I think there are two issues. One, not knowing the rules, which is for us, it's been the same. No presence on patient care areas, and just have an appointment before you talk to someone. And sometimes it's not knowing who you talk to. Just because you email Sam about something that's really outside my domain and you didn't hear back, that doesn't mean I'm difficult. You just call and talking to the wrong person. And I actually talked to, I was in a national meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I talked to one of my pharma colleagues, and he said, I've been trying and it's hard. And I was like, who are you trying to talk to? And it took a conversation about you talking to somebody who's their hours and their focus is totally different from what you're trying to accomplish. That's why you're not going anywhere, not because we are changing our approach. So back to understanding, we really didn't change any of our policies around interaction with pharma. There is some misunderstanding here, but there are rules.
Sure. Okay, great. Well, we have time for one more question, and I kind of would like to take things full circle into kind of what Jennifer was asking at the top of the discussion in terms of just basic communication skills and the importance of that. If there's one tip that you would leave our audience with in terms of what's important to keep in mind, to stay away from, like, as what I think maybe Jamie described as a one-size-fits-all approach, how to tailor things when they're meeting with administrators at oncology-focused health systems such as yourselves versus the community practice. What would that be? Sam, we'll stay with you for a moment while we have you here.
Yeah, I think just taking the time to know a little bit about my organization and what I do. I think if I get the sense that you took that time, I would be more likely to spend as much time as I humanly can afford to provide the information, to collaborate. It's just taking a little bit of time to understand me and my job and my responsibilities.
Great. Yeah, Jamie, give you the last word here.
Yeah, I'll just go back to the comments that we were making before. The genuine curiosity is just so important. The getting to know folks just so important. And I think in exchange for that relationship development that happens through that, the messages that are important to deliver into the healthcare delivery organizations can happen, and they'll be received. And so by building those relationships and focusing on the genuine curiosity, I really think it opens the doors.
Sure. Okay, great. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank Sam, Jamie for an excellent presentation. Jennifer, a wonderful job moderating. This session is being recorded and will be available for streaming on demand in the webcast section of MMM-Online MM+M for a year post-event. If anybody out there in the audience has any questions, feel free to contact our speakers through MM+M. That's a wrap. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.